Accessing library computer data.
And to make sure that history never forgets the name Enterprise.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Penske Podcast. If you haven't tuned in before, this is a podcast where we are running through all 178 episodes of Star Trek Next Generation, giving our thoughts and feelings about each and every one. Right now we're up to episode 24 of season 3. It's Menage a Troi. Look at that clever pun title. A filthy pun title too at that. Anyway, in this episode, Commander Riker, Counselor Troi, and Ambassador Lwaxana Troi are kidnapped by the Ferengi. It's just going to be me talking about this one, so buckle in and get yourselves ready for my heavy-handed opinions about Menage a Troi.
And that was my first husband. Not much of a conversationalist, but, what a lover. Well, then, I met Zany.
I do not want to hear about your other romances. It makes me jealous.
My, what, big ears you have.
Has anyone ever told you how attractive they are?
Some females think they are my best feature. No one has ever given me umaks like this before.
Umaks?
There's no translation, but the ear is one of our most erogenous zones.
Hey everybody, so we're going to talk about Menage a Troi. As I mentioned before, it's just going to be me talking about this one. I don't think it's really an episode that we need to discuss all that heavily. The general breakdown is that Riker, Troi, and Lwaxana Troi are kidnapped by the Ferengi, and it's still very difficult to say Lwaxana. I noticed in the episode, some people just call her Lwaxana, and others go the actual distance and try to make the effort of Lwaxana, which is much more difficult to say. That's the way it's spelt, so phonetically you'd think that would be the way to say it, but let's go with Lwaxana. It's a little bit easier for me. So anyway, these three are kidnapped by the Ferengi. And sort of the Ferengi want to use the Beta Z ability to read minds to help them gain profit because the Ferengi are basically a cliche at this point. Riker, is going to try to escape. Everyone's going to try to escape. Wesley comes through in the clutch and saves the day by figuring out that a static signal in the background is Riker manipulating the warp field. They're doing something to sound like a song that was playing at the start of the episode in order to rescue people. My description actually makes the episode sound worse than it is. I don't think it's a terrible episode. It's probably the best of the Lwaxana Troi episodes that we've seen so far. It's really a light comedy episode, sort of like an adventure, like a swashbuckling adventure, kind of. Not a lot of swashbuckling, but there's a lot of hinted at sex. There's a lot of light comedy. It's not particularly funny, but it's sort of a comedic take on things. The Ferengi are just sort of clueless villains. They're not really intensely evil or anything like that. The way that they're played at the end between the daemon, who I can't remember his name, if I actually get to look at this. Does it come up? Damon Tog, that's it. Damon Tog is sort of played as just a goofy villain, not really evilly intended. He has like an evil henchman doctor who wants to torture people to death. But outside of that, it's not really anything interesting. It's just sort of a filler episode, which is unfortunate after it's come right after a very strong run of Hollow Pursuits. Not Tin Man, Hollow Pursuits, Sarek, and the other one that was in there. Who was the other one? Sarek, The Most Toys. That's right. So we had a strong run of 3. This one's not particularly as strong, which is, I think it's catching its breath before the season finale. Certainly Transfigurations after this is not very strong, but we'll get into that in another podcast. Really the only sort of lasting influence from this episode is the fact that Wesley Crusher, sort of out of nowhere, it's time for him to go to the academy. And of course, it feels like every single time he needs to get to the academy, there's only one ship that can take him. And if he doesn't make that ship, he's not going to get there in time, which seems a little bit odd considering the vast span of the Federation that we've seen. He has to go to the Federation, Starfleet Academy. He chooses not to. He chooses to hang back and rescue Riker. He figures out this thing that the static signal or whatever is the sound of a song that was playing at the very beginning. It's amazing he remembers that. It's amazing he puts the two and two together. Quite frankly, it's amazing that that is what Riker chose to play instead of a SOS or something like that, which you'd think would still exist in the future, or at least Data would be able to recognize SOS. No, Riker does a rhythm of a song that is playing at the very start of the episode. And when Wesley figured it out, I was equally clueless as Picard and the rest of the crew as to figuring out what he was hinting at. It took Wesley saying the entire song for me to connect the dots. So that was a little bit weird. Riker and Troi have a unique situation here. They've started, I guess the implication is that they're hooking up, which hasn't been a part of any episode previous to this, except for like the first season episodes, I think, where they sort of met in the pilot and then they maybe mentioned it once or twice after that. I guess this is a Roddenberry Bible holdover, where in the Star Trek Bible, which is the book that the writers are expected to read and sort of use as the canon for a new series, it's sort of a detailed breakdown of the universe that a show exists in. I guess Riker and Troi in that are described as two people who used to be in a relationship but still enjoy having sex with each other. I guess that's what this episode is hinting at. It's really bizarre. They go on vacation and all of a sudden they're making out down in the garden, and then her mother comes in and interferes. It's just odd that we haven't seen anything hinted towards this. It's weird that they drop it again. It's weird that it goes nowhere. I feel like the show is unwilling to admit that they're basically in a friends with benefits situation. And it comes across as very strange, out of place, and I wondered for a brief bit of time whether or not they were under the influence of a drug or something. Not the case. Instead, they get kidnapped. Riker uses a very Kirk maneuver to get his Ferengi guard to let him out by sort of tricking him into thinking he's going to play chess with him. Makes a lot more sense in the episode than my description does. But Riker tricks him via a very Kirk maneuver, gets out, knocks him out off camera. They escape. They do the little thing to signal to the Enterprise. Lwaxana Troi is, I think, having sex with Damon Togg, something along those lines. She's, doing her thing to delay them. Meanwhile, the Enterprise is trying to find them. They eventually find each other. And the episode resolves with the meme of the why the fuck Picard meme, where he has his hand sort of outstretched, but he's actually forced to pretend that he wants Lwaxana Troi back and to sort of convince the Ferengi captain that he's willing to destroy the Ferengi ship in order to get Lwaxana back. And the Ferengi captain is obviously not interested in dying over this woman, so he sends her back. But it allows Picard in the second episode running after Sarek to have a very Shakespearean, very not over the top, but very theatrical performance piece here, fighting back for Lwaxana's love or whatever. He's a little bit cheesier on this than in Sarek. Sarek was a much more sincere portrayal, obviously, because the material was much more sincere and serious. This one's very tongue-in-cheek, just like the whole tone of the episode. And he gets her back. And that's pretty much it. That's the whole thing. I don't really have a lot to say about this episode. I don't think it's particularly good. It's very middling. It's definitely the best of the Lwaxana Troi stuff. I don't feel like there's a lot here that's really interesting. It is interesting, I will say, that it's written by Susan Sackett and Fred Bronson, who were Roddenberry's assistants. Susan Sackett was the woman that he was having an affair with for a long time. She's a co-writer of the script. And it's weird that Roddenberry's wife, Majel Barrett, plays Lwaxana Troi, and she plays a major part in this script. That is a very bizarre working relationship to have. I don't know who knew what about what, or who had anything they wanted to say to the other person, but that's just a weird Roddenberry. You can't shit where you eat. And I think that's exactly the advice you're supposed to be given about coworker relationships. But outside of that, it's a pretty simple episode. Wesley Crusher. I know me and Modi screw up in the next episode, Transfigurations, where I mentioned that, you'll listen to that shortly, but I mentioned that I didn't understand why Wesley was wearing the red ensign command uniform in that episode, and obviously it's because we skipped Menage a Troi to get to Transfigurations just because of scheduling. And in Menage a Troi, he's promoted to acting ensign, which comes out of nowhere, as I mentioned, and he gets to do his dramatic ending scene where he puts on the uniform and the camera pans up from his boots all the way up to him, his face, his teenage acne-ridden face. And we get to watch him strut confidently down the bridge walkway, take a seat, and fly the ship. So he's going to be an acting ensign for the next year because he didn't go away on the whatever ship was going to take him to Starfleet Academy. Picard realized that he sacrificed a lot and gave him sort of a field promotion to ensign. Maybe the credits apply to his studies or something. I think Picard even mentioned something like that. But that's it. Wesley's now an ensign, and he wears the command uniform. So that is a interesting change of pace. It comes out of nowhere. I'm surprised it took 3 seasons from this to happen. It seems like a good idea. He looks much better in the uniform than he does in his stupid, unbuttoned in the back pant outfit that he wears, that gray thing. It looks better than his rainbow sweater. Everyone looks better in the uniform, which they will slowly realize, and eventually Troi even starts wearing the uniform, which makes a lot more sense. But yeah, not a very strong episode. I don't think there's a whole lot to say about it. It's sort of a light comedy, as all the Lwaxana Troi episodes are. I'm still not crazy about the character. She doesn't feel like she fits, too sitcom-driven. Her relationship with Deanna is odd. I don't know why Deanna reacts to a pet name like Little One so angrily. That doesn't make a lot of sense. That's like the least annoying thing your mother does, Deanna. I don't know why you're reacting so poorly to it. The problem is, as we mentioned before, the relationship is really just a sitcom relationship in a sci-fi drama, and it doesn't work all the time. And Lwaxana Troi's episodes are always trying to be funny. I think that it started that way just because of Tracy Torme's early scripts were very blatantly, this character is broad and funny, we're trying to convince you that she's funny. And they've continued that. She's never had a super serious episode. This one, she kind of redeems herself at the end by saying she's willing to be sacrificed to save her daughter. They don't really hit that point hard. It's not the point of the episode. It's kind of just a character beat that comes later on. It works. It makes sense for the character, but the show isn't interested in that tact. And they're more interested in just sort of this very light adventure story, and now we're going to cut to Picard overacting some Shakespeare. There's something that sounds very Shakespearean, and that's pretty much it. There's really not much else to say. So how about I'm going to play an audio clip. I'm going to learn how to talk. I'm going to play an audio clip, and then I'm going to come back, and I'll give a rating for this episode, Menage a Troi.
It's not over between us, Lwaxana. You're mine, and I will not let you go. I insist you return to my side immediately.
You mean you still care?
My love is a fever, longing still for that which longer nurseth the disease.
Tell me more.
In faith, I do not love thee with mine eyes, for they in thee 1,000 errors see, but 'tis my heart that loves what they despise, who, in despite of view, art pleased to dote. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Let me not
You didn't tell me that you and Captain Picard were...
You said you didn't want to hear about my other romances. I have a new love, Jean-Luc.
And you can't keep killing all my lovers now. That simply has to stop.
Killing?
Oh, he's insanely jealous.
Listen, Tog! I must possess Lwaxana, and if that means destroying your ship in the process, so be it!
Captain, I had no idea Lwaxana...
Don't let him threaten you. You can defeat him. The only way you'll ever get me back is over Tog's dead body.
That can be arranged. Mr. Worf, arm phaser banks and photon torpedoes. If Lwaxana Troi is not in my arms in 10 seconds, throw everything you've got at the crater.
So, Menage a Troi, that's a very short episode of the podcast we're going to do for this one. I don't think it really deserves that much longer of anything to go on. It's really not that interesting. I'm going to give my rating, and the rating scale, as always, is 5 is an all-time classic. 1 is absolute garbage. 2 is an episode that could be improved a little bit. 3 is utterly average episode. 4 is an episode that's above average, and you'd probably start thinking about whether or not you could show it to a non-Trek fan. So 1 to 5. So my rating for Menage a Troi is going to be a 3. I don't think it's terrible. There's really nothing wrong with this show. It's just kind of bland. It's just a boring, regular episode. Nothing really stands out about it. Nothing's terrible about it. It all makes sense. It accomplishes what it's trying to do, which is just, again, this lighthearted comedic thing. It continues using the Ferengi as comic relief, which is kind of a weird... The Ferengi are a very unique race in Star Trek The Next Generation because they occupy this space where they can be problematic, but it never has any long-term impact, which is odd when you think about it, because they're a recurring species, so it's not like you can just one and done them, but they're not like the Romulans or the Klingons where implications of how or the Federation reacts with them actually mean anything, which is a weird character thing. So because of that, they're really stuck only in this sort of like impish, mischievous, not too serious of a situation kind of character thing that they can do. Very comic reliefy, very sort of funny, but they're too annoying to be continuously funny. So it's an odd thing that they brought in this race and tried to make them the new threat to the Federation in The Next Generation. That obviously failed, and now they're just continuing down this track. They have super powerful ships that are just as good as the best class of the Federation, the Galaxy class. And they are just sort of useless, annoying people who don't really have any sort of other aims. They claim to have a Ferengi Federation or something, but it doesn't seem that way. There seems to be no depth to their species. Which is, I don't think that's going to change until Deep Space Nine, but they're just kind of wasted space, and all of their episodes are kind of unfulfilling and don't really amount to much. So I don't know if this episode is boring more because of the Ferengi or Lwaxana Troi, but I will say that the combination of them, the episode actually came out much better than it could have. When you throw in both of those facts together and you mix it up and you come up with this mix of story. So for that, I'm going to give it a 3. It's really not that bad. It's not that great. It's a perfectly forgettable episode in terms of season 3 quality, but it doesn't offend me. So that's it. 3 out of 5, Menage a Troi. So thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening to this very short one. If you're on YouTube, a like and a comment appreciated. If you're on iTunes, a rating, a review always helps the show. That iTunes store rating drives everything. It drives the machinery of the world. Thank you again, guys. Thanks for listening. I'm going to be back with Transfigurations, which was recorded before this, and now is going to be playing after, just like that Mr. Show sketch. Pre-taped call-in show. If you haven't seen that sketch, check that out. Don't watch Menage a Troi. Just go watch the pre-taped call-in show sketch by Mr. Show. Thanks, guys. I'll be back with Transfigurations with Modi Operandus, and I will see you later.